Would you die for what you believe? That's the question Dialogue des Carmélites forces us all to confront. Based on a tragic true story from the French Revolution, Francis Poulenc's opera is music theatre at its purest, storytelling through sound. This story about a young woman who seeks refuge from the violence of the terror in a Carmelite convent, only to be confronted with new and unimaginable horrors, inspired the score of a lifetime from its composer. Once heard, it is never forgotten, and it only takes one hearing to turn a sceptic into a passionate believer. We brought three of the opera's most enthusiastic advocates: soprano Danielle de Niese, who stars in Glyndebourne's new production, author and broadcaster Richard Coles, and music critic Mark Poulenc, together to discuss the moments in this extraordinary opera that made converts of each of them.
Well, Danny, Richard, it's great to be here to talk about Poulenc's Carmélites. There are not many operas, are there, that are set during the French Revolution, but certainly not one in which 16 nuns go to meet their death at the end. How did you first come to meet the piece?
Well, I've loved the music of Poulenc since I was very young. I knew the piano music first of all, and came to the opera, I think, when I was in my late teens. When actually I was the kind of person who in his late teens thought the idea of mass nun executions might actually be quite a good idea for an opera, as indeed it turned out to be. But I think what you hear in all of Poulenc's music, and why he's a composer that I love almost like a friend rather than just a composer, is that strange, really powerful mixture of sensualism and piety.
Yes.
And in my line of work, that goes a long way.
Yes, yes.
Poulenc has this incredible knack to bring to life an image that you feel that the music he composed is the only way one could express that particular image. And because he, as you said, he was, you know, he had this religious side and he had this kind of naughty side and this otherworldly artistic side with these two influences from his parents, one being religious and the other being quite artistic. I feel like he's the embodiment of that dichotomy, the yin-yang between these two sides of himself, and he could absolutely bring sensual, even erotic charge to even religious music.
I mean, going back to the sort of dichotomy in his character, there was a critic in the 50s who labelled Poulenc as half monk, half rascal.
Yes.
And this is why Carmélites was such a big deal for him. You know, he had this reputation as being a bit of a joke, a bit of a wide boy, and so suddenly coming in and doing a serious opera about religion, which in secular France was really quite frowned on. So to take us through the plot.
Well, the opera is based on real events around a convent of nuns, Carmelites, in a place called Compiègne near Paris. 1794, the height of the French Revolution, the height of the terror. And rather than submit to the revolutionary authorities, they instead elect to go to their deaths by guillotine. And the story in the opera is about a young woman called Blanche who's on the outside of that community and gets on the inside of that community, and what happens to her and to all of them as they reach this extraordinary end.
Danny, you sing the role of, going to be singing the role of Blanche.
Yes.
In that first scene, when we first meet Blanche, she's spooked by a shadow. And then suddenly she comes in with this declaration to her father that she wants to become a nun. Where does that come from?
I think it's something that's been sitting in her mind. So this declaration didn't come out of the incident that happened, but it's interesting that a small incident like this, and in fact the father says, well, let's just forget this small little incident. And then she says, there is no incident that is neither small nor large, that does not have a place in the hand of God. One can feel God's immensity even in a drop of water. Yes. I mean, the language she brings to her first convicted thoughts, you know, about where she's going with this question to her father, it's kind of amazing.
Can we hear it?
Yes, this is Mon père, ce n'est pas d'incident. This is Blanche's really first monologue to her father, but it's a monologue to everybody about how she views life. There's a great sort of hymn-like quality. It's very static, the chords, one after the other. It's quite sort of hymn-like it feels at the beginning, and then as the harmonies expand, you sort of understand the trouble that is percolating within her.
That's so good, isn't it? That thing about the sense that this is a world of familiarity and formality that just undoes itself as you go along, and something wilder and richer is there.
Yeah. Poulenc also, I find emotionally, is almost always implosive in his emotion. It's an internal explosion and never a Puccini-esque declamation. So when he chooses to exclaim like this, when she says, "I decided to become a nun," these are very rare moments. Lots of times he'll actually shave the music away and allow the text and the singer to expand the emotion.
So a great clip, thanks Danny, at the end of the first scene, after which Blanche joins the convent. She meets the other nuns, including the rather fierce Madame de Croissy, who's the prioress. We then have the great scene at the end of Act 1, which is the piece that the excerpt that I've chosen from the opera as being, I think, devastatingly powerful, which is the Madame de Croissy, the prioress, is lying in bed. She's dying. She is desperate to get more drugs inside her, from some more medicine from the doctor, because she feels she has to face her flock, to see them one last time before she dies, and she's advised by Mère Marie not to do this. At the start of this scene, there is a little orchestral prelude, if you like, which features a solo cor anglais. There's such a sense of lament to it. And then you've got this deathbed scene where she demands that the other nuns come in, and Marie is just trying to sort of fend them off and say, no, you shouldn't be worrying about us now. You should be more concerned with God. And she said, and she retorts, why should I be concerned with God? He should concern himself with me.
Right.
And there's this death scene where she loses faith.
It's not climb every mountain, is it?
No. It's incredibly powerful. She believes that God has abandoned them. Richard, from your perspective, how do you square this, that a religious leader loses faith just when she most needs it?
Well, exactly, because God requires of us that which we're most reluctant to surrender, of course.
Yes.
It's an opera ultimately about surrender to God, I think.
Yes.
And for the prioress, who's a leader, she's the leader, she's responsible, she has charge of this community. The terror of death for her is exactly that. It's her failure to do what she's meant to do. And there's nothing sentimental about it. And there's no sort of spotlight that all of a sudden suffuses her face with ethereal light. This is because it's the cross.
Yes.
There's no dodging this. You don't get a get out of jail free card. The terrors of death are real. The reality of the violence they face is real. It's blood, it's guts, it's horrible. But it's on the far side of that, and in anticipation of that what gives this opera its radiance and its luminosity begins to kind of burn and rise. After
the death of the prioress, the terror increases, and the nuns are expelled from the convent.
Yep.
And they take this vow of martyrdom.
It's important to say that they had an option.
Yes, there's a vote.
Yeah.
And there's one person who votes against. And Constance gets the feeling that it was probably Blanche. And so she said, no, it was me, but I've changed my mind. I'm happy to go ahead with it now. But Blanche goes on quite a journey and before getting to this final scene where the rest of the nuns have been imprisoned and they're going to face their execution at the guillotine. But Blanche is not there. Where is Blanche, Danny?
She's in the crowd at the end, and seeing her sisters go forward one by one.
Which leads us to the Richard's choice.
Yeah, Richard, tell us about your final scene.
Can I get the easy one, did I? Well, the final scene, the culminating scene, the apotheosis in many senses of the word, when, resolved to die, the sisters go to their deaths. And that death is unmistakably and brutally and bluntly, well not sharply in fact, described by the sound of the blade of the guillotine descending and executing each nun one by one, which of course has the effect of thinning the vocal textures because you're literally losing your cast bar by bar. But they're singing the Salve Regina, which is the great hymn of praise to the Holy Mother of God, who answers all our fears, and through praying to her, she gives us the strength in order for us to accept our inheritance, whatever the cost, which is to go into the bliss of eternal life. Sounds so pat to say it like that, but there's nothing pat about what they're doing. They're going to their death on a scaffold.
Just getting goosebumps. Just
I know,
yeah,
I know.
It's an extraordinary moment.
It is the musical manifestation of that sinking feeling and that hair on your back of your neck. You can hear how complicated these harmonies are. I don't necessarily feel, I mean, we will answer these questions in the rehearsal room, and that's the beauty of a new production, is like you start with just the open room and a lot of ideas and feelings, and it's how you marry them all together in the room with those particular people that makes the show. But I don't know that Blanche necessarily, even in finding her conviction and her faith, I don't know that she loses her fear. I think she surrenders to it.
Yeah. And then at this point, when we get down to just one voice at the end, which is Sister Constance, and just at the point where she thinks she's the last one, out from the crowd comes Blanche. You hear the guillotine for Constance, and then it's Blanche who completes the Salve Regina before the final
And is the
blade
last
falls.
to suffer under the blade. Yeah.
And then we have the final blade.
Well, I think, interestingly, rather like Peter Grimes, you can see why this is the post-war opera that's found its permanent place in the repertoire. Two very different operas, but what have they got in common? I think it's they face the essential darkness and trouble of their times, and yet have something to offer beyond that. I think that's why they both work.
I think there's something inevitable about it. We've been expecting this right from the start, but it's just so beautifully done and so moving.
Yeah.
And the sound of that last line of the Salve Regina from Blanche it offers hope in what lies beyond.
Yeah, it doesn't, to me, when sort of the end of the opera doesn't feel final in the way that some other operas really close it down in a way. They button it up and they go, this is how it ends, and la da 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 da, and everybody has the claps and we're off. I mean, this is, I think all of the characters also, they all have a story to tell, and that story doesn't necessarily end with the guillotine. I think that each of the journeys that each of these characters make, which is the work of the piece, when we're sitting here at Glyndebourne in this idyllic setting for 6 weeks, we'll be in the room digging and digging and digging and digging to really see how we tell each of these journeys. And of course, at the center of that will be Blanche's journey, because Blanche's journey reflects so much the public's view of things. I think she is everyone in the audience as well, who watches and questions and doubts and perseveres.
And she's the convert. She does what Poulenc does, doesn't she? She goes from outside to inside of what's happening in this piece. Yeah. That's the prophecy, I think, the prophetic quality she has.
Yeah.
But which is so Poulenc as well.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh God, I love that guy so much.
Me too. I'm such a Poulenc fangirl.
Hey, I've got 3 Poulenc fans.
Following his triumphant Glyndebourne debut with Handel's Saul in 2015, Australian director Barry Kosky returns with the festival's first ever production of Poulenc's Dialogue des Carmélites. It will also be Kosky's first production of a piece he has waited his whole life to direct, a work that made a profound impression on him as a child that helped inspire his choice of career. It promises to be an unforgettable staging, a 20th century masterpiece brought to new life by one of opera's most daring and creative directors.